Contarte Historias presents Sherlock, Lupin and Me. The Dark Lady by Irene Adler. Illustrations inspired by the work of Henri Toulouse Lautrec. Chapter 9. An Outsider's Secrets. We found ourselves in the usual place, in front of the statue of the pirate, in the projecting corner of the wall that looked directly out to sea. Sherlock and Lupin were sitting on the parapet, their feet swinging in the void, as boys like to do. I, more cautious, lay on my stomach and rested my chin on the backs of my hands. I could feel the jagged stones of the fortification digging into my skin under my dress. So, according to you, we should be afraid? I asked. Because I was starting to have it, and I wondered why neither Lupin nor Sherlock seemed scared in the slightest. Afraid of what? Lupin wanted to know. He made no mention of the snake event, and I made no mention of its intrusion through the window. We found a dead body on the beach, I said. Does that mean there's also a murderer? Not necessarily, Sherlock finally interjected. There can be more than one, or none at all. None, Sherlock? His friend asked. Given the state we found him in, how could he die alone? Death is, perhaps, the most natural occurrence of life. And the note in my pocket. The note speaks of guilt that the sea will erase. A kind of sinister condemnation, perhaps? It may be, or perhaps it is the desperate message of a suicidal person. And in the pockets of his suit there were stones. Why do you put stones in your pockets if you don't want to drown? She wasn't sure he was right. He continued. We don't know who that man was, we don't know how he died, and we don't know if he had any reason to take his own life, so if Sherlock lifted his thin, flayed legs and crossed them in front of his chest, we don't have enough evidence to conclude that he was killed. The hypothesis of a very theatrical suicide is just as valid. You forget the hooded man, objected Lupin. Right, the man in the blue cloak Irene says she saw behind us. I really saw it. I protested. I'm sure you've seen it, Sherlock corrected me, but we can't be so sure. We can't be sure. I thank you for your trust, Sherlock. It's not a question of trust. I would say the same thing if I had seen it myself. The one I saw could be the murderer, I insisted. I'm sorry, Irene, but I have my doubts about this too, Lupin interjected. Oh. And can I find out why? Because a murderer would have gone into hiding, he would have tried not to be seen. Even if it was three guys like us. Well thought out, I conceded. But I'd very much like to be clear about this whole story. There are still things to be discovered, of course. Hoy's the dead man. Was he killed? If so, is the hooded man on the beach the killer? I made the list. Lupin thought for a while, and then answered. The note talks about blame. And one man's faults always leave their mark on the lives of others. Besides, we have the note. We have a clue that no one has, not even the police. I propose that we investigate on our own. Are you really sure? I asked him when I realized he was serious. That note. According to you, we should. Sherlock shook his head. Maybe we should give it to the police and that's it. Oh, of course. Lupin blurted out sarcastically. Let's be good kids, give our clue to the cops and go back to our favorite toys. Didn't you want to find out what happened? He finally asked, opening his arms. Sherlock looked at us, first at me and then at Lupin. And he laughed. What's so funny? His friend asked. I laugh because, frankly, it seems like an impossible undertaking to me. Dangerous and impossible. Do you want to back out? Before you even start? I didn't say that. But think about it, even with that note in our hands, it will be very difficult to find out who this man was, where he lived, and what he was doing here. Not to mention the dangers we risk running. Are you afraid? Sherlock let out another laugh. Actually, I couldn't ask for more. Lupin relaxed. Now I recognize you. What do you think, Irene? I think it's crazy. In the city, they don't talk about anything else. I've even seen a journalist at the post office, not to mention the police. Whoa. Lupin said. Chief Inspector Fleberg. My father thinks he's a complete fool. He spends half the day eating and the other half sleeping. We can pretend it doesn't exist. Yes, but what about the others? Everyone is talking about the man on the beach. Irene's right, Sherlock said. The more people poke their noses into this matter, the greater the danger of them muddling the clues. Lupin slapped his knees and exclaimed. Well, if that's the case, I say we have to move now. I agree, I said. But where are we going? Sherlock looked at us. Our determination seemed to amuse him. Where many of the stories begin and end in this city, he answered, spring to his feet, the harbor. Ahem, Lupin cleared his throat to get our attention. Sherlock and I stopped. We had almost reached the alley that, from the bastions, wound its way down the old quarter of the city. Hey, what are you doing? I asked. Do you convince us and then stand there like a stuffed animal? Lupin didn't move from where he was and looked at us with an enigmatic smile. He seemed to be amusing himself by playing mysterious. There was no doubt that it could become tremendously irritating. Can you tell what's on your mind? I urged, retracing my steps. How would you react if I said that there was someone who knew who the castaway was? Lupin finally asked us, putting an end to the uncertainty. It's simple, I'd ask you if you know that someone, I answered. Maybe, he replied evasively. And swaying like a ridiculous dancer, he began to walk ahead of us. Last night I made a simple reasoning, he explained. Who was this man? I kept asking myself, I couldn't fall asleep. From his clothes, we know that he was a man of a certain elegance, the jacket, the cufflinks. Such a person does not go unnoticed, I told myself. However, this morning, when the rumor of the discovery began to spread, everyone agreed on a single detail. That he wasn't from here, I went on for him, since I had heard the same comments. Exactly, Lupin said, brushing the tip of my nose with a finger. And if it wasn't someone from here, there were only two alternatives. Either I was on vacation like you, Irene, or I was a passing stranger. Early this morning I took a quick tour of the best hotels in town. Lupin wore his usual smile. On the Maritime they haven't been able to tell me anything, but in. Sherlock seemed about to say something, but he shut up and let his friend continue. The Hotel de la Paix, the mystery of our man was more than solved. Ah, Sherlock finally remarked. A friend of my father's works in the conciergerie, Lupin said. I asked him a couple of questions and found out that the castaway was staying there. And from the looks of it, it came and went continuously. For business, he told me. And your father's friend told you what his name was, too? I asked, too curious to wait for the rest of the story. Mais oui, Lupin nodded triumphantly. The name of the mysterious castaway was François Poussin. I was so excited by what Lupin had discovered, and by the ingenious way in which he had arrived at his discovery, that I think I embraced him impulsively, congratulating him on his intuition. And I was just as astonished to realize that Sherlock, on the other hand, had not moved a step and had not said a word, as if something were upsetting him. I even doubted that Sherlock could be jealous of Lupin. As if there was some kind of challenge between them to see who impressed me the most. Even today, that memory still makes me smile. Evidently, I didn't know Sherlock Holmes well enough yet. I had to correct my impression as soon as my English friend finally decided to speak. "Truly remarkable, Lupin," he said. "Nonsense." Lupin, who had meanwhile escaped my embrace, evaded the compliment. "Remarkable, unbelievably unusual, I should say," Sherlock went on, more and more absorbed. "Unusual? What's unusual about having a room at the Hotel de la Paix?" "Oh, nothing, nothing," Sherlock hastened to add. "There is absolutely nothing unusual about having a room at the Hotel de la Paix, especially as a stranger, but the fact is that," his lips tightened and a doubtful expression was drawn on his face. "By a fortunate coincidence, this morning I made an inquiry similar to yours. Parallel, I dare say. I, too, had thought that our man on the beach might be a stranger, of a certain elegance, and, in short, all the things you have just said." Sherlock made another of his long pauses of great effect. "The funny thing is, well, I've found it too," he revealed, looking at Lupin and me with burning eyes. "Only my man's name was Jacques Lambert and he had a room at the Hotel des Artistes." What did you think of this Sherlock, Lupin and Irene Adler audiobook? Did you like the ending? Who was your favorite character? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to our channel to not miss the next chapter. The mystery continues.